The Texas sun blazed across the open plains, waves of heat rippling off the dry earth. A U.S. Army truck rumbled to a stop, and a group of tired German prisoners stepped down, their boots crunching on the gravel. These men, captured in North Africa and Europe, expected barbed wire, harsh guards, and punishment. But what they found instead were cattle and wide-open land. A ranch foreman in a big hat walked up, a lasso hanging over his shoulder. Through translator, he told them they'd be working the ranch, mending fences, driving cattle, and helping wherever needed. The Germans exchanged uncertain looks. They had come from battlefields filled with tanks and bombs, yet here they stood, surrounded by cowboys instead of soldiers. Their weapons were replaced by gloves, their orders by quiet instruction. One young prisoner stared across the endless horizon, whispering, "This isn't prison. This is another life." Within days, they rode in the backs of pickup trucks, following herds under the burning sun. They earned canteen tokens, ate well, and were given a surprising amount of freedom. Texas wasn't the brutal America they had imagined. It was a mix of hard work and unexpected kindness. The Americans weren't cruel enemies. They were farmers and ranchers who cared more about the land than politics. Many of the captured soldiers had feared the worst as they crossed the Atlantic. Nazi propaganda had told them America was a land of chaos and cruelty. But when their ships reached Texas ports and they were sent inland by train, the view from the windows changed everything. Fields of wheat, quiet towns, and children playing in yards. The U.S. wasn't under attack like their homeland. Still, fear remained. They wondered what awaited them when the train stopped: violence, punishment, or death. Instead, they found fence camps built by the rules of the Geneva Convention. There were guards, yes, but also good food, clean barracks, and medical care. And most surprisingly, there was work. America needed labor. Millions of men were overseas fighting. So German prisoners were hired to help on farms and ranches. Their wages went to the U.S. government, and they received small allowances to spend in camp stores. For Texans, it solved a problem. They needed workers for harvesting and ranching. For the prisoners, it was a new world, one where their skills were respected and their days were filled with purpose. Soon, it became common to see German men fixing fences, cutting hay, and driving cattle across the fields. Some had grown up on farms in Germany and quickly proved themselves capable workers. At first, both sides were unsure of each other. Texans expected fierce, dangerous soldiers. Instead, they met quiet young men, thin, polite, and eager to work. Cowboys laughed seeing the Germans line up tools with military precision, while they themselves worked by instinct. But over time, suspicion faded. They shared a respect for effort, honesty, and the land itself. By 1943, more than 50,000 German prisoners were living across Texas, spread among large camps like Camp Hearn, Camp Huntsville, and Camp Swift, as well as smaller branch camps on ranches. These camps were nothing like the horrors the prisoners had feared. Meals were hearty, and conditions were often better than what soldiers at the front had endured. The more they worked, the more the Germans saw the truth behind the myths. America wasn't the broken, violent nation they'd been told about. It was a land of space, strength, and opportunity. In Texas, they learned a quiet lesson no propaganda could hide. Real power wasn't in armies or ideology, but in hard work, decency, and the vast rhythm of the open land. By 1944, over 12 million Americans were serving overseas, leaving Texas ranches shore workers. German prisoners of war filled that gap. Nearly 50,000 of them in Texas alone worked millions of hours in agriculture. Across the U.S., prisoner labor provided the equivalent of more than 36,000 full-time workers, an unseen workforce that kept food and materials moving while American soldiers fought abroad. The difference in living conditions shocked the prisoners. On the front lines, German soldiers survived on barely 1,500 calories a day. In Texas, they received more than double that. Hearty meals of beef, pork, potatoes, bread, and vegetables. To men used of black bread and watery soup, it felt almost unreal. Texas ranches held nearly 10 million cattle at the time, a scale beyond anything they had known in Europe. One prisoner later wrote, "Back home, a big farm had 20 cows. Here, one man owned thousands." It was a harsh reminder that America had so much food, even its captives ate well, while families in Germany went hungry. Prisoners earned 80 cents a day in credit, paid to the U.S. Army, and converted to tokens they could use for cigarettes, candy, and soft drinks. For many, this was more spending power than their families had back home. They also witnessed America's industrial strength. In 1944 alone, the United States built 96,000 aircraft, 29,000 tanks, and millions of tons of ships. By comparison, Germany managed only a fraction of that output. Even Texas ranches reflected this power. Huge operations run with tractors, trucks, and modern machinery instead of horses and hand tools. For the prisoners, these numbers told a painful truth. Germany could never win a war against such abundance. When German prisoners first arrived at Texas ranches, they expected harsh treatment. Instead, they were handed tools and told to fix fences or feed cattle. Some refused at first, seeing the work as beneath them, but soon hunger and boredom pushed them to start. The ranch hands spoke little German, but made their point clear through gestures and patience. The prisoners realized quickly that this was no punishment. It was hard, honest work. The Texas sun was brutal, the land endless, and the cattle nothing like the gentle dairy cows of home. These longhorns were strong, stubborn, and dangerous. One prisoner later wrote, "I fought in Tunisia and Sicily, but chasing Texas cattle was the hardest thing I ever did." Cowboys, too, were surprised. They had expected hostile, arrogant soldiers, not young men struggling to lift hay bales or repair barbed wire. They were just boys caught in a war, one cowboy said. Out here, work made us all the same. As the days passed, the Germans learned how to mend fences, drive herds, and load feed without wasting it. They worked under the same blazing sun as everyone else, resting only when the cowboys did. The Americans gave them water breaks and shared the occasional joke. Slowly, both sides began to respect each other. The first big test came during a cattle drive. The prisoners were brought to open range to help move hundreds of animals into pens for branding. It was chaos, dust, shouting, and wild cattle everywhere. But by the end of the day, the herd was in, and the prisoners had earned their place. That night, over dinner, they talked quietly about the strange pride they felt. They had been sent to Texas as captives, but were becoming part of something bigger, workers of the land, almost cowboys themselves. Over time, the Germans realized ranching was its own kind of system, as disciplined as an army but guided by nature. A single broken fence could cause hours of chaos, just like a failed supply line in war. Feeding herds required precision and timing, not brute force. Water was everything. One mistake could kill cattle and destroy a ranch's livelihood. These lessons showed the prisoners a new kind of power, not domination, but balance, planning, and resourcefulness. Even the most loyal German officers saw it clearly now. They had believed in Germany's strength and order, yet here they watched American cowboys manage vast operations with quiet efficiency. Escape was pointless. The distances were too great, the land too unforgiving. Texas itself was a prison without walls. And in that endless horizon, the prisoners began to understand the real reason for their defeat. America's strength wasn't just in weapons, but in the rhythm, labor, and vastness of its land. The most powerful realization came quietly. If America could spare thousands of enemy soldiers to mend fences, drive cattle, and harvest crops, then its strength ran far deeper than the Germans had imagined. Back home, every able man, teenager, and even the elderly were being pulled into the German war machine. Yet in Texas, prisoners were eating steak while cowboys, too old or too young for combat, kept the home front alive. The numbers told the story. Tens of thousands of cattle, millions of acres under cultivation, food production on a scale that seemed impossible. It wasn't just about ranching. It was proof that America's greatest weapon was abundance paired with organization. One German lieutenant later admitted, "We thought America was soft, that they wouldn't last. But when I saw how their land produced, how even prisoners were put to work, I understood we weren't fighting an army. We were fighting a system built on power and efficiency." The defeat wasn't only on the battlefield. It was mental. Texas had shown these men that America's strength wasn't in slogans or propaganda. It was in numbers, productivity, and a deep-rooted belief in survival through hard work. At first, The prisoners saw the cowboys as rough, uneducated men who just happened to live in a wealthy country. But working beside them changed everything. These cowboys weren't just herders. They were mechanics, veterinarians, and problem solvers. They could ride before sunrise, fix machinery by noon, and bargain over cattle prices at dusk. To men used to rigid hierarchies, the cowboy was a mystery. Tough but fair, independent yet disciplined. Language barriers faded fast. Cowboys taught English words like branding iron and saddle horn, while the Germans shared their own farm tricks. Soon, the camps buzzed with a mix of German and Texan slang, half joking, half practical. The prisoners began to understand what truly drove America: pride in honest labor. In Germany, work was duty. In Texas, it was identity. Cowboys didn't brag about ranks or medals. They bragged about how much they got done in a day. Meals became another revelation. Breakfast of bacon, eggs, and biscuits. Chili and cornbread for lunch. Thick steaks and homemade pies for dinner. To men raised on rations, it felt unreal. Even more surprising was the openness of it all. Cowboys often ate alongside prisoners, treating them as workers rather than enemies. Around campfires, conversations turned personal about family, home, and why America had joined the war. The answers were simple: Pearl Harbor, fallen friends, and the belief that tyranny anywhere was a danger to everyone. Those talks planted quiet doubt in many German minds. The men they'd been told were greedy and weak turned out to be humble, hard-working, and just. Some began to question what they had truly been fighting for. Beyond ideology, the lessons were practical. The Germans were amazed at how little went to waste. Boots were patched, ropes repaired, and tools reused. Nothing was sacred. Everything was useful. Coming from a culture obsessed with order and ceremony, this flexibility impressed them deeply. And above all, they noticed freedom. Cowboys didn't salute or take orders from officers. Their authority came from skill and respect, not rank. A man who could rope a wild steer or ride through a storm earned leadership naturally. To the prisoners, this was a new kind of power, earned, not imposed. By the end of 1944, many German POWs admitted that the Texas ranchers had shown them the real face of America. These weren't caricatures from propaganda. They were living proof that freedom and discipline could coexist. For men who once believed they represented Europe's most advanced nation, that realization cut deeper than any defeat in battle. As months passed, respect replaced suspicion. The prisoners, guards, and ranchers found unexpected common ground. The guards, mostly young farm boys themselves, treated the Germans firmly but fairly. They spoke little of war. Instead, they shared gestures, jokes, and work. One prisoner remembered, "A guard my age showed me how to use a new wrench. We both laughed when I got it wrong. For a moment, I forgot I was a prisoner." The cowboys took it even further. They saw the Germans not as enemies, but as hands who could help keep the ranch running. The prisoners, many from rural German villages, fit easily into the rhythm of ranch life. They mended fences, hauled supplies, and rode through endless plains. Cowboys began to respect their work ethic. The Germans admired their grit. Small acts of kindness built bridges. A slice of pie shared, a handmade toy for a rancher's child, a guard pretending not to see a prisoner ride a horse after work. These gestures carried meaning beyond the war. They showed that dignity could survive captivity, and that real strength came from humanity, not hate. By the time 1944 drew to a close, both sides had changed. The Germans had learned that America's power wasn't just industrial. It was personal, woven into its people, their work, and their belief in fairness. And the Texans saw that even their enemies could be men of effort and honor. In the quiet nights of the ranch, beneath the vast Texas sky, both sides found a kind of respect that no propaganda could destroy. Some German prisoners began writing letters home filled with disbelief and quiet admiration. They described the vast cattle herds, the steady meals, the powerful horses, and the fair treatment they received from their overseers. Those censors reviewed every word. Enough truth slipped through to shock their families in Germany. One wrote simply, "Here, even prisoners live better than free men at home." When the war ended, those unlikely bonds between Texans and prisoners didn't disappear. Some Germans stayed in touch with the ranchers they'd worked alongside, and a few even returned years later as immigrants, choosing to build new lives on the land that had once held them captive. What grew from those dusty ranches wasn't just a story of guards and prisoners. It was a story of men discovering common ground through work, decency, and small acts of humanity. By 1945, German POWs left Texas remembering open skies, hard work, and unexpected kindness. Returning home to a ruined Germany, they carried lessons of fairness, efficiency, and dignity. Inspired by America's strength and humility, many helped rebuild West Germany, proving that respect, not power, could turn former enemies into lasting builders.